Kneel Before Blog presents Kneel Before Pod.
Hello and welcome to Kneel Before Pod interviews. I'm your host Craig, and recently I had the pleasure of talking to Jim Krieg, Jeff Wamester and Butch Lukic, writer, director and supervising producer respectively of the most recent DC animated movie Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 1. Our discussion covers their approach to adapting a massive event, finding the emotional core, and teases for the remaining two parts. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Hi, I'm Craig from Kneel Before Blog. I've spoken to two of you before on other projects. So Jim, this is my first time speaking to you.
Great to meet you, and I love a pun title. I love punctuation in title, and I love a pun title. So Kneel Before Blog is great.
Thank you. I'm glad you like it. So the first thing I want to say is congrats on the film. Absolutely loved it. I think it was a great start to this trilogy of Crisis films. I know it's not easy material to tackle, so well done on all of you.
Thank you.
So on that, adapting something like Crisis must be really, really daunting. Can you talk a bit about how you arrived at making it a Flash story for the first part, so making it a more intimate, character-driven story with this massive thing happening behind it?
In looking at these stories, what we always try to do is when we adapt comic stories, we try to say, well, what do you remember about this story? Because a lot of them are really beloved stories, sometimes from our childhood, and we don't necessarily remember each beat accurately. We just remember the feeling or the tone and certain important plot points. And certainly in Crisis, half the time what we remember is that beautiful George Perez art and those splash pages and those covers. And to some extent, we took those as the major beats and turning points of the story and then worked to retro-engineer it. And of course, the one huge thing that people always remember about Crisis on Infinite Earths is that Barry Allen dies. So it's a rare opportunity in our world to take the focus off of the trinity of Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and look at the Flash and really give him, someone described it as the Flash's greatest hits. And so we tried to hit as much of that as we can. And we still had to lose stuff. We still didn't have room for Wally. But we tried to hit as many points in Barry's life as humanly possible.
I guess the original Crisis also had the Fourth World involved in Darkseid and Flash. And that's already been dealt with in James Tucker's versions, so we couldn't go that way. So Jim had to create a version of Crisis minus the Fourth World version, which was involved.
And you were drawing on a lot of the material, well, most of the material from the films that had been building up to it. Was that easier in a way to use material that you'd created as the basis of it rather than trying to bring in elements that people might not have seen before?
Well, again, we started out, we knew we had to get to Crisis, so basically we had 7 movies to figure out how to get there and find out while we were working on script to script, which character now could become so-and-so by the time we got to Crisis.
It's funny when you say it like that, you think 7 movies, that's a tremendous amount of material. And at the same time, it just felt like we were racing through it. And it would have been so nice to have 17, but it might have killed us on the other hand.
Because Long Halloween was 2 movies that had nothing to do with where we needed Crisis to be. So those 2 movies didn't have any bearing on what Crisis would end up being. So it was the later movies that we had to start figuring out, okay, this is...
But at least we had those characters. At least we could pull his villains out and had some of those props and things.
Yeah,
I mean Jensen Ackles' voice. So.
Jensen is throughout the Batman, and he's Earth 1 Batman from here into Crisis.
Was it at all tempting to bring in elements from previous animated DC stuff because it's had a long history, the old Superman cartoon from the 90s or anything like that, or you might do that in later films?
Well, again, in part 2, we are bringing in 1 or 2 animated characters, but drawn in this style. And from then on into the next films, we'll see.
You'll have to watch all 3 to see how much we were tempted.
I will absolutely be doing that, not a problem. And in terms of the future films that are coming up, the first film is very much hooked on the Flash and his reaction to these events, but you've lost that hook now. So is the philosophy of storytelling similar in the other 2 films with finding an emotional core to draw on?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think all 3 movies, it's an emotional pull because there's going to be losses and destruction and death. So all the way through, it's basically Empire Strikes Back 3 times.
Yeah, and also there are similarities and differences. We always are going to emotionally hook a movie onto a character, but that time travel, non-linear storytelling won't be there. But that would be replaced with how many locations the character goes to and alternate Earths and other confusing elements that hopefully will be equally entertaining.
And did you look at the CW version of this at all? when you were preparing for this?
No,
Nope.
we did. I saw a couple episodes here or there, but in the middle. So I didn't know where they were as far as where we were, but we never looked at them as a source. We just kept straight with what we could and couldn't do with Marv Wolfman and George Perez's version.
Just so you know, we were working on this for a long time. So to find out that they were also working on parallel lines was somewhat disappointing, because in live action, you can turn it around so quickly, and it's a little disheartening. You go, I can't believe they're ripping off the Arrowverse. And you're like, oh, we're not ripping off the Arrowverse.
We're ripping off the George Perez, Marv Wolfman.
Yes, we are totally ripping them off.
Jeff, since you haven't answered one yet, what was it like as a director to take on Crisis? That must have been both amazing and terrifying.
Yes, that is accurate. Then I had George Perez's art. I was a huge fan of his Teen Titans and stuff that he had done. It was a big inspiration for a lot of art that I did at the time. And being able to tackle something like this was both a big honor, but also, good God, that's a lot. But I'm super glad we didn't go super wide on everything. We were actually able to connect with characters, which is, for me as a storyteller, I think is a really strong way to tell a story, no matter how big it is, to let the audience be a part of it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that could have just been a
Even
mess
for
of
me,
continuity, but it wasn't.
When I was a director for Bruce Timm, I think it was the second season at the end of Justice League Animated, he told me, guess what? Third season, we're going to have hundreds of characters more. It's going to be great. I said, yeah, great for you. I quit. And I didn't. So thankfully, Jeff did Crisis and directed it, because I would have just quit.
But yeah, it was good finding that, oh no, this is actually the Flashy story, and then the multiverse stuff is easier to digest because you're seeing it from his point of view.
Yep.
That was one of my fears going in. It was, how am I going to follow this? How is anybody going to follow this? Because if you try and read the comic, it's insane to try and keep up with.
It is. It's beautiful insanity.
These three movies, structurally, it's pretty sound, and you can follow through past the first movie pretty clearly, but there's still shocks along the way, and that's what makes the movies. And I think it'll be a nice finish when we get to the finish. Some people, there'll be some sad things that they'll have to view at the very end, but I think they can take it. Or some people need to grow up. It is a sad ending, but it's also a happy ending.
It's a hopeful ending.
Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes next. Like I say, I love the first film, so well done. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the other two parts play out. I'm being told there's very little time left, so I'll just say thank you for your time. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me. It was great getting some insights into the film, and roll on part 2.
Thanks, you.
man.
Can we say the trailer drops tomorrow? Because it does.
Part 2, yeah.
For listeners, it will be in the past. The trailer will already be out. Thank you very much. That was my conversation with Jim Krieg, Jeff Wamester, and Butch Lukic. We wish them all the best for the remaining films and all future projects. If you want to talk about anything discussed here or anything else, you can contact us on Twitter, Blue Sky, or Facebook under Neil Before Blog, or leave a comment on neilbeforeblog.co.uk. You can also join us on Discord. For more interviews, a monthly news podcast, and deep dive analytical discussions about your favourite nerdy things, join us on Neil Before Pod.